Hello and welcome to CrowdSignal, where we'll take a look at products listed on crowdfunding websites to see whether or not they're worth your hard-earned cash. Today we're looking at Pebble Time, released by Pebble Technology on January 25th, 2015. Best known for breaking many Kickstarter records all in a row. You can see right here, bringing in about $1 million in the first 49 minutes, now at $10 million over the course of a single day. That is every record that Kickstarter has ever had, just gone. Kind of reminds you of the first product that this actually same company released back in 2013, their original Pebble smartwatch, which broke all Kickstarter records with $10.3 million raised over the course of a month, which is not a bad raise for any startup. Pebble Time is their newest entry into the smartwatch category. They've kind of been an ancillary player compared to Samsung, Sony, and of course, coming up, Apple. So it's a really unique product in a very interesting market segment, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. A little bit of background on Pebble Technology. They're a group based out of Palo Alto in California. Originally a Y Combinator startup, also funded by Tim Draper and Draper Fisher's Jurvetson's group. They received $375,000 from that group just in seed funding, which is a great raise and obviously a great networking opportunity. It's kind of hard after that point to not have a really big product. In 2013, they did their $10.3 million raise on Kickstarter in April. They closed later in May and delivered later, more so in January of the following year. Also, to their credit, they released the Open SDK, which is compatible with both iOS and Android platforms. And that did a great thing for them in terms of developing a community of developers for this product that they had just released. And since then, it's been a good place for kind of independent developers to go to and see what sorts of things that they can do and play with using the smartwatch platform. These things, if you didn't know, they all typically come with the same things: screen, some sort of touch interface or button interface, often an accelerometer, some sort of haptic feedback, occasionally a microphone, most often a Bluetooth interface, now Bluetooth Low Energy to connect to your smartphone. But the processing power usually remains fairly light. Most of that is handed off to the smartphone and then pushed back to the smartwatch device. 2013 was fairly successful for Pebble. They made about $43 million on that product. Later in 2014, they released the Steel version, which I'm going to bring up here on Amazon, now listed at $200, $191, which is pretty incredible for still a product a year old. Steel didn't actually come with that much of a difference. It was 1 millimeter thinner, so it went from 11.5 millimeters to 10.5 millimeters. Had the same battery life, which was really nice at the time, and really still remains class leading, 5 to 7 days. They're saying 7 days for the Pebble Time. But otherwise, basically the same. An e-ink display, about 144 by 168, which results in about 190 pixels per inch. This one had Gorilla Glass because the original Pebble, let's see, this one here had this really odd kind of plasticky type of display that had just like a varnish on it or something, and it would scratch up really easily. So Gorilla Glass was a helpful addition. Unfortunately, it also came with a really nice price increase from $150 to $250, which a lot of people were pretty unhappy about. Especially given that there still was no touchscreen interface, still using buttons on the side, but it still sold pretty well. So well that Charles River, which is another famous investment group, came on board and now sits on their board and is quoted to have said that it's one of the fastest growing startups that they've ever been a part of, and they've been a part of Twitter and Foursquare, so they definitely know what they're talking about. And that brings us to 2015, where Pebble Time was released. Same display, now color, still e-ink, same resolution. Made some minor UI tweaks, one called Timeline, which allows you to use those buttons on the side to kind of scroll through the temporal notifications that you might receive. Still no touch, but this battery life stays the same. They also upgraded the processor from the ARM Cortex M3 to the M4 while reducing the case size to 9.5 millimeters, which obviously has an impact on battery life as well. So what do I think of it? Overall, I was a bit surprised when I first saw this. I love the tagline, awesome smartwatch, no compromises. Not true at all. There have been plenty of compromises on this watch. There is no touchscreen. It's not a high-resolution touchscreen at that. It's still buttons, no speaker, and that's fine. This thing does not look like a professional-grade piece of jewelry or fashion. You take a look at this picture, and you ask yourself, is that worth $160 for the early backer or $180 for the mid-range backer? I would say resoundingly no. This reminds me of Tamagotchis, and that's usually not a good association. It's very infantile. It's very basic. That looks like it could scratch very easily. According to the Reddit AMA, they will be releasing a steel version of this eventually, and I would strongly suggest that you wait for that version, because this, I would not walk into a bar and score any points with any women with this watch, especially when the middle schooler buying Flaming Hot Cheetos at 7-Eleven is, wearing the exact same thing and totally happy with this, very bright, I'm sure an adorable sun with a happy face crudely drawn in. So that by itself tells me that this product might be a little bit overpriced. Again, $43 million in 2013 when they first launched, and that's for a Generation 1 product, which is very unusual. A high margin like that, the gross margin on that product was calculated to be about 52%, which of a $150 product is $78 in profit. That's after cost of goods. The equivalent gross margin for Apple products is about 40%, which means that they spend a little bit more on their product. This is a cheap looking thing and you are paying a lot for it. Granted, the market brackets right now for smartwatches are in that sweet spot of about $189, so this is clearly tailored towards that. But just let's be real, guys. Look at what you're getting. Is that worth it? I don't know who this is for. You look at this design aesthetic, and what I ended up doing was I took a look at their homepage. You look at their splash page, and you can immediately tell what their target customer segment is. This is not developed for, someone who needs a professional notification system using the latest smartwatch technology. This is something that might be closer to a toy. Look at these graphics. These, their whole design aesthetic is very kind of retro, 8-bit pixel art style, which is cool and trendy and effective. And, it, from an information design perspective, I think it works very well. And it works very well with their kind of limited resolution on their screen. But this doesn't scream professional grade to me. Take a look at the Apple website. Yes, it's $100 more, sometimes more, depending on, what version you get. But if this is the standard, the mainstream, kind of early adopter, early majority-ish type of product, what is Pebble? Pebble is an early majority product, potentially marketed towards kids. And with this many backers this early on, it doesn't make sense for an early adopter because it doesn't have enough technologies or features that would be compelling to that sort of person. They would want it brimming with features and technologies and the latest specifications, and this has none of that. Does it make sense for an early majority? Yeah, but I would be careful. This is still an early adopter category, but an early majority product. So yeah, it'll have all those great things of being like good enough, which in any business school they'll teach you is kind of the nice spot to be, because you know you can make plenty of money, and this is clearly evident of that. But other mainstream early majority products and early adopter categories, the Gen 1 iPod versus, you know, the creative nomads at the time, beepers, Palm Pilots. Take a look at this and tell me you can't imagine this being something that you spend a boatload of money on and you end up finding it 4 years later in a drawer somewhere. And you're like, oh man, I can't believe I bought this. This is that product. This looks like that product, most surprisingly. Who buys this product? Maybe indie developers, people who have already gotten onto the SDK, are very familiar with it and want to program new things with it. Totally get that. Clueless early adopters, people who just want to buy new stuff for the sake of buying new stuff and can't wait until April for the Apple Watch. Rich kids, I mean, this is kind of a kid-friendly device. It's very simple and very easy to use. They'd have to have a little bit of money, though, in order to afford something like this. And maybe folks that have bought previous Pebble products and are just loyal. That perfectly fine, too. From a fashion perspective, I wouldn't touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. I, by no means, am a fashionable person. But when you look at things like the Samsung Gear or the Moto 360 or the Apple Watch, they get it. Watches, up until the last 5 years, are fashion accessories. For men especially, it's the only fashion accessory that we have access to. So it's important that it looks good. It's a statement about who you are. It's like a car or a suit or, you know, your shoes. And you look at this and you say, what does this tell you? Will you walk into a meeting and expect people to take you seriously? I don't know. Not when it looks like a Tamagotchi. If you're fashion, if you're a guy looking for fashion and you need it to be kind of smart fashion, which I totally get, wait till April. Wait for the Apple Watch. Functional, practical. Yeah, sure. Maybe there's some really nice benefits that maybe still have yet to be explored and identified with having a smartwatch. That could be cool. I get that. Is this the version to do it? Probably not. The whole idea of a smartwatch as a second screen type of platform is to receive notifications, very streamlined, highly contextualized, ideally with as much of the thinking being done on the phone side rather than the, you know, biological brain side. That's one of the reasons why Google Now and Siri are doing so well, is because they're looking into some of that contextual computing, that information design that allows itself to understand what is the type of information you need and when. So it's not overloading you with all this data that we now have access to. This looks like a possibility for that, but you know that Google Now or Siri, Apple, they are working on that stuff. They have way more dollars to throw against that. They have way better, you know, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms and scientists that study that stuff for a living versus this group. And they're going to be able to provide way more relevant, interesting, informative notifications than this company. So if it's a functional and a practical, you know, perspective or angle that you're trying to aim for, still would not go for this. And then finally, if you're an early adopter and you just got to have the latest technology, maybe, but the Apple Watch will probably be a better bet for you. Just wait till April. It's $100 more. If you're an early adopter, price, you know, maybe something that you're willing to compromise a little bit on. And I'd recommend it rather than have one of these watches sit in your drawer and be discovered by your children, you know, 10 years later. So in closing, no, I would not back this campaign. I don't agree with the 45 or so thousand people who have already decided to do so. This is an early majority product in an early adopter category that tends not to be successful. I think the smartwatch platform in general still needs to be perfected. That's not going to be done through this platform. I think that'll probably be done by Apple or Android. or an Android device. And it'll take maybe a couple more years before we finally get it right. But this seems like a waste of money.